My name is Emily Carter. I serve in the U.S. Army, trained to stay calm in chaos. But nothing in boot camp prepared me for the day. I watched my father strike my mother in open court. The sound cut through the courtroom like a whip. My mom's head jerked sideways, her glasses skidding across the floor. And then came the words that froze the room. "You've always been a parasite." I stood up. My body moved before my mind caught up. I removed my cap, placed it on the table as if it weighed 100 pounds. "Your Honor," I said, loud and clear. "Please turn to the final section." That was the moment everything cracked open. People turned. My father's face paled, his smug expression twisting into confusion. My mom didn't even look up. She sat like she always had, quiet and small, as if she could shrink herself out of pain. But I had come prepared. That file held 10 years of truth. Photos, records, statements. It held every bruise my mother ever had to explain away. It held the version of our lives that no one outside our home had ever seen. Still, even with the evidence in hand, part of me couldn't believe it had come to this. I'd stood on foreign soil, faced threats I can't name, but nothing had ever made my hands shake like this. Because this wasn't about a mission. This was about a promise I made long ago. You see, before I was a soldier, I was a daughter. I grew up in a house where silence was survival, and dinner was served with fear. And to understand why I stood up that day, you have to understand what it took to sit down for so many years. So let me take you back. Back to the kitchen where I first learned what tension tastes like. Back in the night, I decided who I would become. Back to the day I stopped being afraid. The kitchen was always too quiet in the mornings. You could hear the sound of the coffee boiling over, the creak of the old floorboards, and Mom's soft humming like she was trying to hold the air together. Her sleeves were always pulled down, even when it was hot, like they were hiding something they didn't want us to see. She'd slide a bowl of cereal in front of me and whisper, "Eat up, sweetheart, before it gets soggy." Her smile was thin but practiced. I didn't know what bruises looked like yet, but I knew her eyes held more pain than rest. Dad stomped in with his work boots like a storm in a flannel shirt. He never looked at me when he barked. "Where's my thermos? Why is the toast burnt again?" He never really wanted answers, only someone to blame. Mom always tried to explain. "It's on the counter." I dropped the pan. But her voice got smaller with every word. He'd grumble something mean and walk out like he owned the air we breathed. When the door slammed behind him, the house let out a sigh. That's how it always was, like we were all holding our breath until he was gone. Mom would clean in silence, her hands moving in slow circles on the counter, as if she could wipe away everything he said. She never said he was cruel. Just tired, just stressed, just trying his best. But I knew better, even as a kid. I knew kindness shouldn't make you flinch. I knew love didn't come with conditions or fear. Sometimes I'd look at her and think, she's so strong, even when she looked so tired. She kept our lunches packed, our laundry folded, and never once let us go to school without a hug. Her love was the only thing that felt steady. But I hated how small she made herself. How she walked on eggshells, just to avoid another explosion. I wanted to shout at him, to grab her hand and run, but I was just a kid with skinny arms and shaking legs. Still, something inside me started to grow. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was resolved. But I remember watching the news one day, seeing a woman police officer lift the yellow tape at a crime scene, calm and composed, and thinking, that. I want to be her. I didn't have the words for it then, but I wanted power. Not the kind Dad used to scare us. I wanted the kind that protected. The kind that could say, enough, and make it stick. Back then, I made a promise to myself. That I'd get strong. Strong enough to stop him. Strong enough to shield the woman who had spent her life shielding me. It happened on a Sunday afternoon at the grocery store. I was sitting on the bench outside while Mom ran in to grab milk. A woman in uniform walked past me, her posture upright, her gaze steady. She caught my eye, smiled, and gave me the smallest nod. It wasn't much, But something about her made the air feel safer. She didn't look rushed or afraid. She looked like someone who didn't have to shrink herself to be accepted. I remember watching her walk away, the weight of her boots leaving soft thuds on the concrete, and thinking, I want to be like her. That night, after Dad had fallen asleep on the couch and Mom was in the laundry room folding quietly, I took a spiral notebook from my backpack and opened a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, 3 things I can control. Underneath, I started a list. My breath, my voice, my focus. It made me feel calmer, even if just for a minute. Every night after that, I wrote something down. I tracked how many times Dad raised his voice. I made a code for how Mom looked when she was hiding a bruise. I wrote down the license plates of strange cars parked outside, the time he came home, and the tone of his voice. It sounds strange for a kid, I know, but it helped me feel like I wasn't just waiting for the next explosion. I was documenting it, witnessing it, preparing for the day I could finally do something about it. And in between the lists, I drew pictures of uniforms, not just army fatigues, but badges, hats, boots. I read every book in the school library about women in the military. I memorized ranks and acronyms. I watched recruitment videos on the school computer during lunch. Each day, the fear I lived with didn't go away, but it got quieter. The image of that woman in uniform stayed with me. She never said a word, but her silence was loud enough to shift something in me. I didn't tell anyone about my plan, not even Mom. But deep down, I decided that one day, I'd earn a uniform of my own. One that meant I could protect, not just survive. That day, a stranger gave me more than a smile. She gave me a reason to hope. My mom never yelled. She didn't slam doors or throw things. Her strength came in quiet doses, like folding laundry with shaking hands or keeping the fridge stocked, even when the bank account was nearly empty. She moved through the house like a shadow, soft and precise. You'd barely notice how she swapped out the broken lamp or taped over a cracked window before Dad could see it. Her goal was always the same: to keep peace, even if it meant breaking herself in the process. I'd watch her wipe blood off the bathroom floor like she was cleaning up spilled juice. No drama, no sighs, just quiet movements and the smell of antiseptic. When I asked her once why she didn't fight back, her eyes flicked toward the hallway, checking for footsteps. Then she smiled that tired smile and said, because survival isn't always freedom, but it's something. I didn't understand it at first. I thought she was giving up. But later, I realized she was buying us time. Every meal she cooked, every excuse she gave, every bruise she covered with long sleeves, it was all a strategy. She kept a jar of quarters behind the old cereal boxes. I thought it was for laundry, but one day I found a note tucked underneath. It said, "For the girls, if you ever need to leave fast." That's when I knew she was never blind. She was just quietly planning. When Dad yelled, she'd gently steer me and my sister to our room, not with fear, but with steadiness. She never cried in front of us, not once. But I heard her some nights, muffled in the bathroom, the faucet running to cover it up. She wasn't weak. She was deliberate, measured. She knew the war she was fighting wasn't one she could win with fists or words. She was playing the long game, one where her kids would get out, even if she didn't. That conversation, survival isn't always freedom, stayed with me. It made me see her not as passive, but as patient, strategic, the kind of brave that doesn't need applause. Years later, when I found myself in a different kind of uniform, I thought about her every time I zipped it up. I wanted to be strong like her, but with tools she never had. I wanted to fight the way she couldn't. Because the truth is, her endurance gave me my foundation. Every quiet act, every small protection, every unspoken sacrifice, it all built the woman I became. She never needed a badge, but everything I did with mine was for her. The first time I raised my voice to him, I was 16. He had just called my mom useless for the 3rd time that week, said she was lucky he put up with her. I snapped, saying he was a coward for tearing down someone who never fought back. He turned, stunned for a second, then laughed. It wasn't anger in his face. It was an amusement, like I was a puppy trying to bite. He didn't hit me. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. That night, he didn't come home. And when he did, he reeked of someone else's perfume. At first, I thought maybe Mom would finally say something, but she just washed his shirt and placed his dinner on the table like nothing had changed. She didn't eat, just sat there, folding napkins into neat little squares while he scrolled through his phone. One evening, I followed him. I wasn't subtle about it. I didn't care. I saw him kiss a woman in the parking lot of a cheap motel, her lipstick smudging his collar. I stood there long enough for him to notice. He looked at me, smirked, and walked inside with her. I didn't tell Mom right away. I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me hoped she already knew, and maybe part of me didn't want to see her break. But when I finally told her, her response gutted me. "I know," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "It's not about him. It's about keeping this house, keeping you safe." She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging me to understand. She just sat there, shoulders square, face blank. That's when I realized her silence wasn't surrender. It was armor. She was still playing the long game, but I wasn't, not anymore. That night, I stared at the ceiling in my room, fists clenched. The walls felt thinner than ever. I could hear him snoring across the hall, like nothing in the world could touch him. And I thought, this is how he wins. Not by breaking bones, by convincing us we have no other choice. The next morning, I started documenting everything, every insult, every moment he didn't come home, every bruise Mom wouldn't talk about. I bought a second phone and used it to take pictures, record audio, and save texts. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was building a case. I started going to the police academy not just to learn, but to prepare. I asked quiet questions about domestic cases, evidence chains, and legal thresholds. I learned where the line was and how to cross it cleanly when the time came. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not even Mom, but in my heart, something hardened. He wanted to be the only one with power in that house. He wanted to leave us with nothing. Well, I had other plans. If he wants to take everything, I'll show him what everything really means. I started with photographs. Not dramatic ones, just small, quiet snapshots. A bruise on my mom's shoulder is barely visible under her blouse. A shattered plate on the kitchen floor. A calendar with 4 missed days circled in red when he hadn't come home. I labeled everything by date and time. Saved them on encrypted drives. Kept backups on a flash drive hidden behind the paneling in my closet. No one knew. Especially not him. Next were medical records. I convinced Mom to see a doctor for chronic headaches, then slipped the visit summary into my folder. When the nurse asked her quietly if she felt safe at home, I watched my mother smile and say, yes. I didn't say a word. I just wrote it down. Neighbors helped without knowing it. One mentioned in passing how often they heard yelling. Another told me, during a casual walk, that my dad had once thrown trash over their fence during an argument. I asked careful questions, always friendly. Then I wrote it all down. The hardest part was pretending. At home, I was still his daughter. I laughed at his jokes. I handed him the remote. I poured him coffee with hands that didn't shake, even when I wanted to slam the mug on the floor. But inside, I was something else. I was watching him, studying him, measuring the way he moved when he exploded, and how fast he cooled off. I started to understand his rhythm better than he did. I kept everything in a plain black binder. It looked like homework from the outside, something no one would question. But inside, it held 10 years of rot. It was neat, tidy, unemotional. The day he smashed Mom's phone because she got a text from an old friend, I added the broken pieces to a Ziploc bag. The next morning, She acted like it was her fault, said she shouldn't have left her phone out. I nodded. Then took a picture of the shattered screen in the trash. I wasn't just collecting proof, I was preparing for the trial. Every folder, every screenshot, every recorded voicemail was a piece of a puzzle I planned to lay on the table one day. But it had to be airtight. No emotion, no guesswork, just truth. Each night, after he went to bed and the house was still, I opened the binder and reviewed the evidence. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just turned the pages one by one, making sure I missed nothing. Then I'd close it, slide it into my case file, and whisper to myself, the law won't miss this. The courtroom wasn't loud. It was too still, like everyone could feel something coming, but didn't know what. My dad sat on the witness stand, legs crossed, arms stretched, like he owned the room. When he spoke, his voice didn't shake. She contributed nothing. She lived off me like a parasite. Mom flinched, but didn't say a word. Her hands were folded in her lap, one thumb nervously rubbing the other. I could see the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to disappear. My stomach turned. Then he stood. Walked toward her like he was still in our living room, not under oath. The bailiff took a step forward, but it happened too fast. My dad leaned in, spat the word worthless, and slapped her across the face. Gasps rippled through the room. Chairs shifted. One of the jurors dropped their pen. But no one moved. Not the judge. Not even my mom. She just sat there, cheek red, eyes wet, lips pressed together like she'd expected it. I didn't think. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. I walked to the front, straight-backed, steady. I placed my army cap on the table beside me. Your Honor, I said, voice calm but hard. Please turn to the final section. He looked confused. So did the attorneys. But I opened my case file, pulled out the black binder, and set it down. The room was dead silent. My dad opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge, then at my mother. And then the truth sits in front of us, page after page, year after year. This wasn't a family matter anymore. This was evidence. The judge adjusted his glasses and opened the binder. The first page was a photo mom's wrist, purple and swollen, dated and time-stamped. The second page is a medical report from the ER. Next came screenshots of text messages, recordings transcribed with clarity, and statements from neighbors stapled one after another. Each turn of the page was louder than any shout could have been. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My father was sinking into his seat now, his arrogance peeling off like cheap paint. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something fast, but it was too late. The truth was already in motion. The judge stopped on a page with 3 voicemail recordings. He pressed play. My father's voice filled the courtroom, slurred and vicious. If you say anything, I'll make sure you regret it. You hear me? Then a crash, then silence. No one breathed. The bailiff stepped closer to my dad. His lawyer stood up and tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. His voice was colder than I'd expected. We've seen enough. My mom's eyes met mine for the first time all day. She didn't cry. She just gave the faintest nod, like a silent thank you for not letting her carry this alone anymore. Then came the handcuffs. The bailiff turned to my father, read him his rights, and snapped the cuffs shut. For the first time in my life, I saw him afraid, not angry, not smug, just small. They led him out of the room. He didn't look back. The door slammed shut behind him. The judge turned toward my mom. Ma'am, you are no longer obligated to this man in any legal, financial, or personal capacity. The court recognizes years of abuse, and we thank your daughter for her service, both military and personal. Applause didn't follow. There was just silence again, but this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like a release. I gathered the binder, closed it carefully, and tucked it into my bag. As I zipped it shut, I said quietly, mostly to myself, the law won't miss this. The court granted Mom full ownership of the house. There was no fight left in him by then. His lawyer didn't argue. The restraining order was immediate and permanent. He didn't come near us after that. Not once. The woman he'd left us for disappeared just as quickly. No calls, no threats, nothing but silence. The first few mornings felt strange. No footsteps slamming down the hall. No yelling over burnt toast. Just quiet, real quiet. The kind that doesn't carry tension under it. Mom started opening the windows again. She let the sun in like it was something new. We cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing away years of dread. I replaced the light bulbs he'd never let us touch. She tossed out every cup he'd ever broken. One afternoon, I found her standing in the kitchen holding a chipped plate. She stared at it for a moment, then set it in the trash without a word. That small act said more than any speech could. We sat in the backyard that evening, just the two of us, with mugs of tea resting on a table between us. The same backyard where she used to hang laundry in silence, where I used to hide my notebook. The air smelled like jasmine and fresh-cut grass, not fear. She looked at me and smiled. "It feels strange," she said. "Like I'm waiting for something bad to happen." I nodded. "Me too," I told her. "But it won't." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We sat there until the sky turned pink and the tea went cold. For the first time in years, we weren't waiting for a door to slam or a voice to rise. We were just there, still, safe. And in that quiet moment, with nothing but the sound of leaves rustling and the clink of her spoon against the cup, I realized something. Peace doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it tiptoes in when you've finally made enough space for it. That night, we slept with our doors open. If you're watching this, and you've ever lived in fear, I want you to know something. You're not alone. Not now. Not ever. Fear has a way of making you feel isolated, like you're the only one holding your breath in your own home. But I've been there. I know what it's like to measure your words, to memorize footsteps, to live for the quiet moments in between storms. And I also know that surviving something doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've been strong in ways no one could see. The kind of strength that keeps going, even when the world tries to convince you that quitting would be easier. My mom taught me that. She showed me that endurance isn't the absence of action. It's an action in disguise. It's courage that whispers instead of shouts. It's planning. It's protecting. It's waiting for the right moment to stand up, not just for yourself, but for someone you love. I used to think justice came in uniforms and courtrooms, and sometimes it does. But it also comes in small decisions. In saying no, in speaking out, in refusing to carry shame that was never yours to begin with. So if you're still in that place, still holding your breath, still shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort, hear me when I say, you deserve better. Not later, not someday, but now. Your strength is not invisible, it's just waiting. And when the time comes, it will rise. Endurance is not weakness, its strength is waiting for its moment.